There it is.
I don't know if you see that one, Pete. 139.
139. We're cranking them out. We're going to be in the 140s before the end of the week. And tell you what, they've been a lot of fun until yesterday. That was horse crap. And I'm going to say we apologize right now because John had some internet issues. I had major issues, and we apologize, but it's not like the two of us are out there on the polls either. I mean, I had a couple guys, John, coming at me going, Jesus Christ,
SWB audio capture,
okay,
not registered.
I don't remember that I told you that I work for, the cable companies or anything or whatever. Anyway, we got through it, and here we are.
Yep, and I got a new, I'm pulling a full gig here now, Pete. So we got a super fast internet installed, and the old one is in the trash. I was surprised how fast they got it. I literally got it 2 hours after I ordered it. And everybody's always giving me crap about, I bet in the third world down there, you don't get things done. Yeah, turns out we do.
John, all right. People just don't understand that it might have been third world. It might have been third world a while back, let's go back 20, 30 years. But in the last even 5 years, call it, because of guys like yourself and a lot of these guys in the crypto world and anybody, I mean, there's some wealthy people down there. And with that, usually things start to step up, right? And they have.
Yep, very much. Yeah. And the infrastructure, I mean, shoot, Pete, the things that I would have complained about when I was back in Chicago, we paid off all of Puerto Rico's debt during the COVID crisis. So bang. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into macro minute, shall we, Pete?
Let's do it.
Macro minute, because that's all it's worth. Right now, we've got markets soft because things like Netflix and Goldman really sort of disappointed, and they tried to rally back, but they really couldn't, Pete. So I'm going to say, it's not a big sell-off today. It's just kind of a meh day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been primarily the Dow, John. The NASDAQ actually has already reversed and gotten back into positive territory to some degree. So that's been something. But I think looking at the markets, to your point, I would say UK inflation was something that
SWB audio capture,
those numbers,
not
John,
registered.
Say, well, I thought we didn't do this anymore. I mean, they got a 10.1 annualized number in March. It was 10.4 in February. I mean, it's still an issue, and hasn't gone away for them. And I'm not positive it's gone away as much as people want to think it has here. So Time will tell, but I think that's part of what people have as a backdrop for the market.
I was telling somebody on Twitter, Pete, that Germany's it was zero hedge, in fact, and he was putting up information about Germany, them closing their last nuke and saying, well, prices are going up 45% for energy. I'm sure if you're somebody who drives an EV over there, you're really pleased about that. But, German inflation 7.4%, Pete. So they're not out of the woods by a long stretch.
Right.
All right. Let's talk about fantastic futures. That's right. Well, Bitcoin is the future I'm focused on here, Pete, because now it's down 3% on the day. We know, you and I know from AJ Monty, one of our chief technicians, that when you break through resistance, you usually don't just get and run. Usually you break through it to the upside, in this case, which Bitcoin did, and then you pull back. And on that pullback, that's the buy. So if that's the way it works out, great. Down 3% today to 29,300.
Yeah, and it has been bouncing around, John. You and I have talked about those beta stocks, those miners that are moving with Bitcoin, but in a much more rapid fashion, for sure. For my fantastic futures, John, Jared.
Fantastic future.
Nicely done. I'm looking at the 2-year, John, and just what the pace of that has been to the
SWB audio capture, not registered.
People probably aren't really paying attention as much as they used to or should be, but if you go from a 3.75, it was on April 5th, and here we are today at a 4.25, right around that range. that's a bigger jump than people are probably understanding right now. And I'll tell you what, I think that is an area to keep an eye on. The 2-year, of course, we still talk about the 10-year, but as we are moving around through earnings season and everything else, I think that's a really, really important part of the fantastic futures that we're talking about each and every day.
Yep. Well, Pete, let's dive into a stock that you and I both followed. And luckily, I followed Ken Griffith, one of the smartest investors out there. And he put on a big bet in Western Alliance Bancorp. Now, quickly, you know that the banking crisis really accelerated on the 9th and 10th of March. So on the 14th, Ken announced that he had bought over a 5% stake, or right around that level, in Western Alliance Bancorp, WAL. Well, they're surging big time this morning because their deposits, instead of shrinking, Pete, grew by over $2 billion since the end of the quarter. That's a pretty bullish sign, I'd say.
Yeah. You know, the other thing too, John, is everybody wants to lump everything together, right? Not everything is exactly the same. I'll give you an example. So Western Alliance lost $6 billion in deposits in Q1. Silicon Valley lost $42 billion in deposits in a day. I don't know that that's exactly the same situation. So I think both yourself and Ken Griffith and others out there actually identified a lot of the smart things about what's really going on, who really had some issues. The other thing too, John, the one number that sticks out for me is, you know, when we talk about the FDIC and the insured deposits, it has continually risen.
SWB audio capture not registered.
Now 73% of those deposits are in that insured area. So that gives people a heck of a lot more breathing room and probably a good chance to take a deep breath. And it makes full sense that this stock is moving the way it has. It's been an incredible morning, particularly just watching how this thing has reacted as people are starting to digest what happened back in March, specifically with the regional banks. And we've got a lot of earnings over the next couple of days still coming for those regional banks.
Yeah. And in full disclosure, again, folks, I own WAL, I own PACW, and I own FRC, First Republic. And that's the dog of those three. But we'll see whether or not I'm planning on holding it, Pete. This is not a quick flip for me. So those others, though, man, Western Alliance, when you get a chance, folks, pull that one up. Because if you look at the graph of that and where Ken likely was buying it, Western Alliance, go back 1 month, because 1 month will take you back to when Ken basically announced that he was in, and the stock was at that time 24. But it went below 10, Pete. Yeah. I mean, the 52-week low was 750. So I think this one probably made his year, even though Ken pretty much makes his year every day.
I don't think he needs this one either, John. You and I know him pretty well. I think he's done pretty well in other places, but it gave you more confidence than ever because of the fact that Ken, and we know him well, he bought one of our companies. But knowing that this guy is a very, very smart guy, shrewd investor, and if he's somewhere, I think usually you probably want to ride it because he is no dummy.
Yep. Well, now let's talk about Legend Biotech.
SWB audio capture not registered.
The stock was up 20%. But one of the reasons we think, now again, this is a leaked document. So, you know, put this in the category of don't buy it just because John said this. But they have a cancer therapy along with Johnson & Johnson that reduce the risk of relapse of certain cancers like multiple myeloma and things like that by 74% in a phase 3 study. Now this document leaked, so that's why I'm putting that, you know, out there that if you're somebody who's, you know, never traded this stock, never heard of this stock, you might want to explore this a lot before you get in. But when we were looking at it moving, we were saying, why is it moving this much? That is why, that rumored leak.
Yeah, and those numbers, John, pretty impressive. I mean, when you look at this company, they actually have a pretty decent pipeline. When you look at the the balance sheet. It's very manageable as far as we talk about the free cash flow, or in this case, burn. And there is some burn there, but it's not at any dramatic level. And this is a company, if this is right, John, I mean, there are some estimates out there of what the size is of what they potentially could at least take a bite of. And 9.6, billion-dollar industry. It's a big, huge area that a lot of people are trying to get to. We talk about Merck and what they've done recently with an acquisition, and there are others out there with acquisitions, but this is just an incredible biotech company with great therapies and so forth. And you got to love what's going on, John, because they're still working so hard to try to make the lives of all of us just that much better if possible. And if these numbers are even close to what was leaked there, which I think they probably are, this is really, really good news for the future, and not just for their stock,
SWB audio
but for
capture,
the rest of us
not
out there
registered.
that are out and having to deal with any of these kinds of ailments, cancers, whatever.
Yep. That's LEGN, folks. Legend Biotech is the symbol, and is the name, and the symbol's LEGN, and it's up 19% right now. That's on 10 times normal volume.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Intuitive Surgical, Pete. These guys, they have that so-called Da Vinci machine, I believe, which is where a doctor, he or she could be anywhere in the world, and with that, they can operate remotely on a patient, because the robotic arms are basically sitting there above the patient, and whatever the doctor does, those robotic arms do, even if it's on the other side of the world. So it's pretty impressive technology. It always has been. But shares are up pretty good today, double digits, because the amount of procedures was jumping by about 26%, Pete.
Yeah, and that is huge for them, John. It's something, it just shows they have to go and teach people how to use the robotics. They do. They got to go to these surgeons, including our own father, who at a time in his career, he actually did use that. And it's really, really an interesting deal. 26% procedures, John. That's a big jump. I mean, this is a company that's been around for a little while. It's got an incredible balance sheet. When you look at the cash flows, that's just stellar. I mean, across the board, everything looks good when you look at this company. I've owned it in the past. I don't own it right now. Kicking myself for not owning it, because it really is one of those innovators. However, that being said, the Da Vinci is not cheap. And that is something that for a long time, John, I actually used to use the Da Vinci and the sales that they had of that, because if hospitals were out there willing to pay the millions of dollars that it takes to be able to get one of these,
audio capture,
that says
not
something
registered.
about the economy. It says something about the hospitals and how they're doing financially and all the rest. And I oftentimes would use that. But I'll tell you, amazing quarter. You look at the revenue, that was up, I think, 12, 14%, something like that. They beat on revenue. They beat on earnings. Just an incredible report. And with those procedures jumping the way they are, John, it also probably tells us that, you know what, the sale on those Da Vincis is probably not so bad either.
Yep. And what shocked me, Pete, when I was looking through the report, you probably knew this, but I did not. They have 12,000 full-time employees. Now, Pete already described that many of those employees that aren't doctors will sit in the operating room with the doctor and show him or her how to use the machine effectively. And that's not uncommon. You have that with Stryker, when somebody's implanting things for spines and hips or whatever, those are procedures that until the doctor really learns how that thing was made to work, they more or less are side by side with the person who is the expert, but doesn't have the 6 years of medical school and the license to practice medicine. So that's very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, maybe give us a little something on what you're seeing now with some of the football and so forth that's in the college level first.
Yeah, sure. John, it's really interesting. College football has been interesting. We talked about the transfer portal in the past, and I thought it would be fun to kind of revisit it now, John, because everybody is now moving towards spring football games, right? Everybody's gone through the off season. They've signed people. By the way, we're going to get into this in just a second, but Deion Sanders, This guy has absolutely changed everything about Colorado Buffalo football. I mean, it's just amazing. It is
SWB
on the
audio
map.
capture
It's on
not
everybody's
registered.
map. And a guy who was absolutely attacked in the portal. He's a guy who came out day one. A lot of people saw that speech in front of his players, and he said, "Hey, look, if you're not ready to go and work, get out." Basically, that was I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he was pretty aggressive about, you know what, we don't need you. If you don't want to be here, you don't want to work, we don't need you. Well, he went out, John. He's got 28 transfers that have come in, and not only has he gone out and grabbed those transfers, but he has grabbed those top end guys, the 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. And it's been an unbelievable haul that he's been able to make. I just wanted to point out a couple of things there, John. How about this? He's got a 4-star linebacker coming out of Alabama. Not such a bad football team. That seems like something pretty good. He got 2 more linebackers. He's got a 5-star cornerback that came with him from Jackson State. He's got a 3-star running back out of Kentucky. He's got 4 wide receivers, 4 offensive linemen, 6 defensive linemen. He is loading up. And I guess what I think is so interesting is he's outdoing everything from LSU to Auburn to USC to Florida State. You go across the board, John. Colorado football might be back, but will they be back in your opinion? Is he a good enough coach? We know he can recruit. We know people love his celebrity, but are they in a position, because you've got somebody who goes to school there, are they in position for a guy like you to get maybe a little more involved and go to a few more home games with Deion pacing the sidelines and maybe a few more wins, because they didn't have many?
Well, I bought a townhouse out there, Pete, in Boulder. I bought it because it was a good deal, but also because our youngest daughter goes to school there. And I just see a lot of upside, quite frankly. It's the People's Republic of Boulder.
SWB audio capture not registered.
But one thing that they're all going to be united about is Colorado football, because as you said, he has set the world on fire. Nobody has signed as many people as he has. And a lot of his players, even some of the starters, are leaving. And that's okay. Again, the kids go where they're going to play and get noticed. And if they see him bringing in a lot of cornerbacks, you're not surprised to see, for instance, a couple of the cornerbacks transfer because they're worried that maybe they were good enough when Colorado was bad, but they might not be good enough when Colorado is good. Pete, the spring game sold out. 45,000 seats for the spring game, completely sold out. So that tells you how excited people are for what Deion is doing there. But you and I know you get the players, and now you got to have the coaches get those players in the right positions, whether they're offense or defense, to make the plays. I think they'll be ready to make those plays. It's not like he's just running them up and down hills all day, Pete. I'm sure he's getting their fitness at a high level, but you're Colorado football players. You're probably breathing easier than everybody you play all year because you're already playing at a mile-high level. But I think overall he is going to do very well. Jackson, I think he did great there, Pete. He was stealing people from Saban and from his alma mater, Florida State, back then when he was at Jackson, Pete. So, I'm not surprised to see him have this success, and I hope he has a lot of that same success when they start playing real football in the fall.
Yep, I hope so too, John. I think it just would be fun. I mean, for the people who don't follow it the way you and I do, Colorado football at one time actually sort of slid in front of both Oklahoma and Nebraska back in the day when they were still in a different
not
conference,
registered.
Big 8. Then they went over to the Pac-12, and they've just had a real struggle for a long period of time where they just can't seem to be able to piece it together. They got the talent now. Now it's up to Deion to actually do his end of it as well. All right, John. So the next one we're going to go to is yesterday we started this, and I think it's kind of fun because it's always fun to unearth something that nobody else is talking about. So I got this one for us. We're going to talk about the sleepers today. We already did quarterbacks. We already did, other positions, wide receiver, tight end. So today it's offensive lineman and edge rusher. So we're not talking about somebody who's projected to go in the first round. That's not really a sleeper. We're talking about guys that are somewhere further down, that really could make an impact either for the team or maybe they even rise up in terms of where they go in the draft. So when you look at the offensive lineman, John, here's what I'll give you. You got Paris Johnson from Ohio State. He's a big dog. You got your guy from Northwestern. There's a kid named Broderick Jones out of Georgia. Heck of a player. All these guys are going to go in the first round. All four of these offensive linemen, including Darrell Wright from Tennessee. They're all that good. Their numbers were great, but what they did on film was even better. I'm going to give you one that I'm a little biased on, John. How about this? John Michael Schmitz from the University of Minnesota. Now, this kid's a center. You don't see centers go very much in the first round. He probably won't go in the first round, but he's a big, huge center, and he's athletic as hell get out. He had a 6-year career at the University of Minnesota. He was the most dominant center in all of football. And if somebody drafts him, you kind of lock up a guy probably for the next 10 years to be your center, which is a huge thing to do. 6'4", 300-pound guy, athletic as all get out. Who do you think from the offensive line perspective? And then we'll jump over to the edge rushers.
I suspect you know this guy and you like him, Pete. Jared Patterson at Notre Dame. He started at center for 3
SWB
years,
audio
3
captured,
seasons,
not
and
registered.
then he shifted to guard. So we're talking about a 4-year starter here, Pete, which is something that very few people ever get to be a 4-year starter. And only really at schools like Notre Dame do players stay that long. Mm-hmm. But he's probably right on that, cusp of being that high level guy that, would have been a first rounder or whatever. But if you can play center and guard in the NFL, and I suppose that means he most probably, I don't know this for a fact, Pete, but most probably has long snapping skills as well. I think you're in a position to do really well for a team that is making a decision. Okay, it's 5th round, it's 6th round or whatever. And I'm not trying to curse the kid. I hope he goes much higher than that. But if he's in those rounds, that's a kid that could still be with the program when training camp closes, rather than some guy they take a shot on in the 3rd round that, we only can carry 3 running backs and this is our 4th, so we're going to have to cut him. I think this guy with the multiple positions, he could be one of those sleepers in the draft.
And John, he played on an offensive line that you and I have a good friend, John Alt, played at Iowa, played in the show, the NFL for many years. He's in the Ring of Honor down there in the Chiefs Stadium. It's just, he's an unbelievable player. His son is the left tackle at Notre Dame who has started every single game other than the very first game his freshman year. He's not going to be a sleeper. He might be the first pick in the entire draft. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, that's how good, how big, how strong. Joe Alt is his name. So keep an eye on him. And the Notre Dame fans ought to really appreciate what this kid looks like on the field. He's amazing. How about edge rushers, John? It's not going to be Will Anderson.
SWB audio captured, not registered.
Tyree Wilson. You've got Van Ness from Iowa. You got all these great players. I'm going to give you a kid that nobody will ever talk about, but he will be an all-pro in his first 3 years. Nick Herbig out of Wisconsin.
Damn it, that was my guy.
Huh?
That was my guy.
Oh, well, I told you to check in with me and you said, no, I'm going to do my own. But he's a 4.6 40 guy. So he's got speed. He's in 2.5 years, he's got 21 sacks. That's a big number for college football, by the way. He had 9 in 2021. He had 11 in 2022. He had 36 tackles for a loss. I mean, the guy, John, when you look at guys who actually produced on the field, you start wondering, why is this guy not ranked somewhere even higher than he is? He's right now the number 100 player in the draft. That's where his position is. He is not a 100 guy, John. This guy ought to be somewhere in the first 2 rounds, which means somewhere in the 40s, maybe 50s. He gets a shot with somebody. But if he slips that far, somebody's going to get a steal because this guy is productive. He's a stud. I've had an opportunity to watch him up close. He's a heck of a kid and a great rusher, and not just a rusher. He could also be in the middle if they needed to as a linebacker. So he's very, very versatile kid who I think will be a big-time sleeper, but he won't be a sleeper for long.
All right. Well, then I'm going with my number 2 guy, Pete. Viliami Fehoko. This guy played at, I think it was Pete, San Jose State. The Spartans down there. Mm-hmm. He's from the Bay Area. The kid's 6'4", 265, Pete. And just get a quick little rundown, Pete. Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year
SWB audio capture, not registered.
Second team last year. All-American second team for a different rating, PFF, the Pro Football Writers and all that. Mm-hmm. I think this guy, East West Shrine Defensive Player of the Week, preseason All-Mountain West, first team preseason Athlon All-Mountain West. I mean, the kid is great. He's had 23 sacks, Pete. Big kid, strong kid, doesn't look like that tall, lanky guy that you usually see as an edge rusher, like Bosa and things like that. But 6'4", 265, he's no shorty either. He's just stocky as hell. And so I think people will look at that, Pete, and I'm not sure where exactly he is. Let me see. Where did they rank him? I'm guessing, Pete, he's probably 133rd player in the draft, it says here. Mm-hmm. We'll see. I think somebody that gets him will be real happy to have him. So that's what we're looking for, the guys that can be the sleepers and break through.
Well, and we saw one last year, John. Mr. Irrelevant seemed to be a pretty damn good quarterback for the 49ers until he got hurt. So don't look past these guys. I mean, you know what? Mr. Irrelevant, Purdy, he goes, the last pick in the draft. That's why he's Mr. Irrelevant. And all he did was have an unbelievable season while he was healthy until he wasn't with Philadelphia. But wow, what a run they had with him. So these sleepers do play off a lot of times. And boy, I'll tell you what, John, I think he's a great example for all of these guys that are maybe coming down to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, round of the draft. I think it really is pretty cool when you get a guy like that.
Yeah, you get pretty excited about it when you, especially because it shows that the scouts did more than just
audio
say,
capture, not
like
registered.
Your guy, Pete Herbig, they said, well, his arms are only 32 inches or whatever. And it's like, okay, what's more important, the length of his arms or how he did in a career at Wisconsin?
Right.
A little more important. But by the way, Pete, did you see that one kid that rammed out, I think, 50 reps with 225? Just, and it was almost like they had to stop him.
Yeah.
It was literally like his arms were just pistons.
I think that once they get to 50, they ought to just say, you know what, guys? That's it.
No más. Well, thanks for tuning in, folks. We appreciate you. Make sure you share the Rebels Edge with your friends. We'll be back tomorrow for the wind up on the week because we only do Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Pete and I will be back. Have a great one.